Welcome, everyone. I'm Zinelle October, Executive Vice President of ACS, and I'm so glad you are all here with us today. We at ACS are recognizing our 20th anniversary this year, and while we all have a lot of work still to do toward creating a more just future, today we wanted to pause and take a moment to reflect on the growth of our network and its impact over the past 2 decades. I have been with ACS for more than half of its 20 years. I've seen some of you grow from 1L representatives at your law schools into elected officials. Along the way, some of you have been litigating cases that affect so many of the rights and liberties we care deeply about. And some have been pursuing your path to the bench. Some of you have worked to protect the rule of law in government, and some have made sure there were progressive voices in traditionally conservative spaces, and much, much more. You all have been building progressive legal communities, sometimes from scratch, in your regions. We like to say that ACS work falls into 3 categories: shaping debate, building the network, and making a difference. Today's event will feature brief discussions with some ACS superstars organized along those 3 themes. We have a lot further to go before we realize we the people, a truly inclusive democracy. But today, we want to honor the growth that we've made these past 2 decades because of all of you. We're so glad you're here, and we can't wait to see what we accomplish together in the next 2 decades. Right now, I'll turn things over to our ACS Board Chair, Peter Karanjia.
Thank you, Zinelle. So I want everyone to think back. The year was 2001. The Supreme Court had just issued its infamous decision in Bush v. Gore. There was no explosion of tweets and retweets dissecting the decision, no Facebook news feeds blowing up or podcasts offering quick reactions, because of course those technologies didn't exist. Instead, the legal community and our community now, many of whom are here tuning in now, absorbed the decision, thought about what should be done. We had Justice Peter Rubin, then a law professor, now on the Massachusetts Appeal Court, recognizing the need for a new organization to focus on our courts, on the rule of law, on safeguarding our constitutional values and equal justice under the law. And he began in a Georgetown classroom with the help of many others who were instrumental in building this then fledgling organization. And as I say, the rest is history. Now 2 decades later, it's remarkable to look at how ACS has grown exponentially. We have an unbelievable 200 different chapters for law students and practicing lawyers across the country in almost every state, and we're working on getting to every state, every single state. So thank you, Justice Rubin, for your inspiring vision and leadership over the last 2 decades. Thank you to everyone, and there are many who have supported the network right from the beginning. And I want to thank our speakers for joining us today. It's a real honor and privilege for me to be serving on the ACS board, which I've been doing since 2017. Including, of course, some years where the attacks on the rule of law were, the most profound I've ever seen in my lifetime. But I think Zinelle's point's well taken. We have a lot of work to do, but there's also a lot to look forward to. And I look forward to seeing many more things we can accomplish together in the next 20 years. I'll now hand things over to one of our ACS next generation leaders, Mary Kelly Persine, who will facilitate our next discussion. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad and excited and honored to be here with the staff, board members, especially students and friends of ACS to kick off our 20th birthday celebration. I'm Mary Kelly Persine. I serve as the Vice President of Legal and Strategic Advocacy for New Teacher Center and currently lead the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the Bay Area Lawyer Center of ACS. I led my law school chapter and co-founded an ACS moot court competition, and then ACS named me one of the next generation leaders in 2007, our first class. ACS has been a really important part of my life in the law and my life as an American ever since that time. I want to mention that there's more NGLs here with us today, and you're going to hear from them later. Colin Parent is 2007, my class, Austin Evers, 2008, Jessica Jackson, 2011, Saraswati Singh, 2012, and David Adeleye, 2020, and it's great to see you. Today is a terrific opportunity to engage with how ACS has shaped debate over the years and continues to do so today when it's more important than ever. My involvement in debates hosted and shaped by ACS stretches all the way back to the year that I joined, which was 2004, when I joined the Columbia Law School chapter. The next year, ACS hosted a Constitution in 2020 conference that became a book edited by Jack Balkin and populated by many ACS luminaries in 2009. Back at the conference during those years of our exile, ACS was imagining and foreseeing the power of the Constitution to support the lives and prosperity of all Americans. And I actually remember speaking at the student retreat that year on the topic of the Reagan-Meese papers, if folks remember back that far, and their perspective on discrimination, in which we considered ways to more successfully defend anti-discrimination laws in the courts by defending disparate impact over intention, and that battle still rages today, and maybe now more fiercely than ever. Back in 2005, I don't think I could have foreseen how pitched a battle would be waged over this preservative of all rights, the right to vote in 2020. And Kathleen, Clyde, I want to bring you in and ask you about this. You've been intimately involved in civil society in the battle for reproductive rights through your career to date, which includes service as an Ohio State representative and a very close second for Ohio Secretary of State. Can you name an example of how your ACS involvement enabled you to shape recent debate on voting rights?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Mary Kelly. And I too have been involved in ACS since I helped restart a chapter at Ohio State University when I was a law student there, and helped form the Columbus chapter of ACS, and am now an active member of the Northeast Ohio, Cleveland to Akron ACS chapter. And it has been a critical part of my legal career and my time spent in the legislature. A lot of time fighting, defending the right to vote, which ended up culminating in a run for Secretary of State in Ohio. That's the chief election official. But on shaping the debate, talking about voter purging, it was something that we noticed in Ohio was happening. More voters were being purged, and unfortunately still are being purged from the rolls in Ohio than any other state in the country. We were purging hundreds of thousands of Ohio voters, canceling their voter registration. And this was something I picked up on. And through my involvement with ACS, I was given a platform to speak on voter purging and to talk to national leaders, to come to the convention, speak, engage with folks, and sort of flesh out a legal theory that then Ohio led a constitutional challenge from of our purging all the way to the United States Supreme Court on whether or not that practice should be occurring. And it was through ACS that those legal theories were developed, that this issue really was given the spotlight that it deserved and that it still has. I think a lot of people are very concerned about purging that's going on in Georgia, that's going on in other states. And really, I feel like it was that work of ACS shaping the debate, having those conversations, amplifying the work that we were doing in Ohio and in other states to really bring that out in the forefront and have a key voting rights issue as part of now what we are thinking about when we're trying to defend the critical right to vote.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that work has been so incredibly important in advancing the public understanding and debate over purging and other forms of suppression that we really hope can be helped, can be stopped. very soon. Judge McKee, I want to turn to you. ACS has featured you for a long time in programming about the need for better representation on the bench and the persistent problem of implicit bias in the legal system. ACS is so fortunate to have you for these debates. In your 2009 appearance at the National Press Club press conference hosted by ACS, you argued that implicit bias is an unavoidable presence on the federal bench. And given that the most recent cohort of federal judges is far less diverse than those appointed by the previous administration, what impact do you predict? And what steps should we now take to ensure a more representative and diverse judiciary in the years to come?
Kelly, thank you very much for that excellent question. Unfortunately, I think the impact is going to be a lessening of and a moving away from the entire concept of equal protection under the law. There's an old saying that where you come out on an issue oftentimes depends on where you go in. And I think that's very, very true. Unless judges have an understanding of all of the forces at work in their own minds as well as in the courtroom, it's really hard to get the kind of just result that I would think that we would all want. That's particularly true in the criminal justice arena. In 2017, Justice Kennedy wrote an opinion for the Supreme Court in Pena-Rodriguez versus Colorado, which is an incredible document. It basically, not basically, it does do away with the no impeachment rule, which for centuries, both here and before the founding of the Constitution, precluded the thought processes of jurors from being used to impeach the jury's verdict. What Kennedy said was that if we're ever to eradicate the vestiges of racism from the criminal justice system, that rule has to give way to allow for meaningful and reasoned inquiry into jurors' minds in order to extract the tentacles of racism from the criminal justice system. Judges who are aware of the concept of subliminal bias and the impact that it can play in their decisions as well as in verdicts, I think will take a very different approach to voir dire. And there's a platform now, there's a legal roadmap, I think, from that opinion to allow for a much different and a much more substantive inquiry during voir dire to try to get at the kinds of factors that has led to the incredible disparate treatment of Black folks in the criminal justice system. You see this in the death penalty statutes, the death penalty studies that have been done that showed not only is a Black person more likely than a white person to be found guilty for a similar crime under similar circumstances, much more likely to be given the death penalty. Even beyond that, there's a study which suggests that lighter skinned, more Eurocentric, if you will, appearing Black folks have a higher tendency to be, have a lesser tendency to be given the death penalty than more typically Afrocentric, if you will, defendants when all of the factors are adjusted for. So the more typically Black one appears, the darker the skin, the curlier the hair, the broader the nose and lips, the more likely it is that that person will be sentenced to death with all of the factors controlled for. If judges are aware of that kind of subliminal racism in the courtroom, during voir dire, you can get at those kinds of attitudes. You can't eradicate them, but there are also studies that suggest that when people are made aware of their own subliminal bias, they can oftentimes take steps to combat it. And I would hope that that can happen by more informed studies into subliminal bias and the way we're cultivated in this society. My fear, given the beginning of your question, is that the recent cohort of judges may not be attuned to allow for that kind of inquiry. And that's what I meant when I said that where you come out on an issue in large part is governed by where you go in.
So Judge McKee, just a quick follow-up. What do you think ACS ought to be doing?
I think the kinds of forums that you've been holding to try to sensitize jurists, especially to these kinds of issues, to try to sensitize lawyers so that they're informed about the kinds of things they should be pressing for in voir dire. The only problem, I guess, with the seminars is that it's the old saw of those who most need it are the least likely to attend, and those who least need it are the most likely to attend. So many times you'll find yourselves preaching to the choir, but it's still a worthwhile endeavor, and judges can reach out to their colleagues who may not otherwise be inclined to attend to try to get them to attend seminars. And your seminars are of such high quality. It won't always happen to include others, but it will with, I think, enough of a percentage of people who wouldn't otherwise be inclined to attend can be interested in attending to make it a worthwhile endeavor.
That's a really great suggestion. Thank you so much for that. Building the network is always something we want to continue thinking about, including attendance at our events. So thank you so much for that. Professor Greenfield, I want to turn to you now. You've been such an important presence on the ACS scene for years. In terms of shaping debate, most recently, you coordinated publication of a letter calling for Donald Trump's immediate removal from office in January 2021, so just last month. This was a bipartisan letter that drew broad support. Why was it important to publish the letter? And how does the letter reflect and enrich your role as faculty advisor at BC Law ACS chapter?
Thanks, Mary Kelly, for the question. It's true that the letter is a great example of the kind of assistance that ACS has provided me in my career and can do on the national scene. And let me bracket the question about the letter just for a moment and back up and answer it in this way. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. My dad was a Baptist preacher, and I'm quite different from him in my religious beliefs at this point in my life. But I still feel like the part of my job as a law professor is to be an evangelist for ideas. And there's been nothing more important in my career than to be associated with ACS and to have the ACS help me spread ideas, engage in debate, really nationwide. And the infrastructure that ACS provides for shaping debate and assisting those of us with ideas to share those ideas has been really invaluable and has been such an important thing, not only for me personally, but for many other scholars and professors. And ACS has really helped me a lot in three basic ways. One is like the way that they've helped me find media placements for my op-eds. And one of my most noted op-eds was in my hometown paper in Kentucky. It was aimed at Mitch McConnell, and it was an idea that ACS had and encouraged me to do, and helped me with their media assistants like Nancy Rodriguez and other excellent help and professionals there, helped me get that placed, and it became national news, and I appeared on a bunch of national outlets. That kind of thing has been really helpful to me. They have given me access to different chapters around the country, to share my ideas, my books of various kinds. I've gone to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Boise, Idaho, and Lincoln, Nebraska, in order to share my ideas. And because of ACS, I've been able to get out there and cross-fertilize with other scholars and thinkers. And then finally, like you said, Mary Kelly, is these ideas of periodic letters. And I think letters can be overdone. They can often be ignored if they're done too often, or if they're not done thoughtfully. But on the night of January 6th, I sat in my living room thinking, I've got to do something. And what I thought that I could do is to write. So I wrote up a 200-word letter and reached out to ACS, and Deborah Perlin and Ileana Thompson were so helpful in spreading the word about this letter. And within 24 hours, we had over 1,000 signatures of people calling for the immediate invocation of the 25th Amendment or action on impeachment. And I think that was part of the effort that really pushed this national debate and on that horrible day. And so without ACS, that would have been impossible to do.
Thank you so much. And I know I speak for many in saying thank you for that letter. I think that was an excellent example of how support of rule of law is also support of human values and the protection of people, literally. And so that was very much appreciated. I would love to be here and speak with you all day, and I know that our audience would as well, but we need to move on. I want to thank you so much, Kathleen, Clyde, Professor Kent Greenfield, Judge McKee. Thank you for being here with us today and for helping us celebrate our 20th birthday. I'm going to pass it over to Saraswati Singh.
Thank you so much. Well, welcome. I have a wonderful panel for this session. My name is Saraswati Singh, and I was co-president of the Minneapolis-St. Paul Lawyers Chapter for 4 years in a row. I decided not to run this last year because my mentee that I helped foster decided to run, and he was ready. So we had a wonderful, peaceful transition of power. I'm also a NGL member and a proud member of the class of 2012. Now, this session is called Building the Network. And ACS at its heart is a network, a family. And I thought I'd share just my experience of building that network here in Minnesota. So I attended the University of Minnesota Law School. I became treasurer of the resuscitated ACS chapter and eventually became president. During that time, we held a lot of events. We had previously been defunct, and at first, the number of attendees, it was smaller, right? Because we were just getting restarted. And we found a really good way of improving attendance and expanding our network was co-sponsoring. So we would co-sponsor with other organizations. And so if we focused on a gender equity session, then we would ask the women lawyers to co-sponsor with us. We ended up expanding our attendance quite significantly, and also having a budget for food really helped. Anyway, as part of those events too, we had speakers come and talk, right? And a number of them were professors or judges, and some of them had heard of ACS, some of them hadn't, but by holding these events and them learning who we were, how we value democracy and rule of law, and just an exchange of ideas, people were attracted to us. So we started getting luminaries interested and involved with ACS. I was recruited by the Lawyers Chapter once I graduated to join the board. And I eventually became law student liaison. I loved it. And I took my job to go to the law schools. That is our pipeline. I'm hoping that we start going to high schools next, but starting with the law schools is really important. And people take you more seriously in law school if you show up, right? If an attorney is showing up, if luminaries are showing up and saying, "Hi, I'm attending your law student event. I'm here to mentor. Hey, we have this happy hour. Let me bring a number of the board members here so you can mingle and get to know the network." And the network is really valuable because many law students like me don't come from a family of lawyers or judges. They just don't understand this system and how to succeed and what skills you need to develop in order to do well in this profession. I mean, law school teaches you many things, but not necessarily the best at teaching you the practical skills. And then anyway, I did a lot of that when I was a law student liaison. And then eventually I became president. I continued to do that, and I found that it had even greater power because the president of the Lawyers Chapter was showing up to student events. Another thing that we did when I was president is we continued co-sponsoring, actually started co-sponsoring a lot more. And so we would co-sponsor with ACLU. We would co-sponsor with the affinity bar organizations. And let me tell you, the affinity bar organizations, at least in Minnesota, were initially reluctant to co-sponsor with us. They thought we were political, not understanding our 501c3 or status. And so I just did what I did whenever I want to build trust and buy-in. I showed up to affinity bar group events. I'm a member of Minneapolis. I'm an Asian American. I would attend their events as a member. I would attend the Lavender Bar Association events. I would attend Mabel events because they were important to me, and the values that they had were similar to ACS's. We want to have a bench that's reflective of our society. And so co-sponsoring has been helpful. attending affinity bar group events has been helpful, and then attending law school events have been helpful. So that's just a quick recap of how we've built up our progressive legal network here in Minnesota. Now, enough of me talking. We have a wonderful panel, and I'm going to just go straight to the questions. And panelists, if you could just say your name and maybe one sentence about you before answering the question, that would be great. So the question is, can you each speak to an example as to how your work or professional development has been benefited by engagement with the ACS network in the last 2 decades? We're going to start with David.
Hey, thank you. I'm David Dreyer. I'm a state representative in Atlanta, Georgia. For probably 4 years, I was chair of the Georgia Lawyers Chapter. During that time, we engaged a lot of more established leading lawyers in the state of Georgia, and it was terrifically successful. And of course, I got to go to the ACS National Convention several times. At the National Convention and through some other folks that I knew for the network through ACS, I met another ACS member, Jessica Jackson, who at the time was working in California. She had been working to eliminate the death penalty in California, which she was able to help accomplish, along with a lot of other people. And then she went to a group currently called Cut 50 and Reform that's working on a variety of incarceration and over-incarceration issues. One of the things that Jessica let me know about is a friend of hers who got to be a very close friend of mine, who had suffered a miscarriage while incarcerated because she was shackled and fell and was unable to get adequate medical care in a timely fashion. I could tell you some more stories. They'll keep you up at night and they'll make you cry. But through that connection with Jessica, through connection with our friend Pamela Wynn, who suffered the miscarriage, we started working on a legislative package here in Georgia called Dignity for Incarcerated Women. And it precluded the shackling of pregnant and postpartum women. It precluded the solitary confinement, which in medical watch is solitary confinement. If you ever hear that term, don't believe it's anything good. It's solitary. So we precluded and prohibited the solitary confinement of pregnant and postpartum women. In Georgia, as in some other states, women would give birth. They would have their child removed from them after an hour of visitation, and they would be sent to solitary confinement. So you have a postpartum woman whose child's just been removed in solitary confinement. And we were able to tell those stories. And let me just say one thing really quickly. When I would tell other legislators that, particularly members in the Republican Party, they would tell me, no, we can't be doing that in Georgia. And after I heard that 3 or 4 times, I finally realized that, well, of course we're doing that in Georgia, because no one is speaking up for some of the most vulnerable people in our society. If you talk about intersectionality, women, mostly of color, often from poor homes, many who have been sexually assaulted or abused or physically abused. We were able to get that package done. We were able to get a lot of trust from the allied groups, which was, took a lot of work for me as a white dude to be able to do that. But we put in the work and we were able to do that. And we have continued to work on further reforms here in Georgia. The ACS network made that happen. The ACS network really, talk about a state in the deep South. We're sort of blue right now, but if you talk about a state in the deep South with one of the highest maternal mortality rates affected by the legacy of slavery and systemic racism, we were able to help some of the most vulnerable people. And it really was solely because of this ACS network. And then the final thing I'll say on that now, that we are a little different in our political atmosphere here in Georgia. The networks that we've established a long time ago are in the room and having conversations about a more diverse bench. And we will be able to have a lot of input in the appointments of federal judges. And I'll tell you why that matters, because I do a lot of work with the immigrant community here in Georgia. I represent in my private practice a lot of women that had unnecessary gynecological surgeries in ICE custody, which you've probably seen about. We were not able to bring immigration cases in the 11th Circuit because the national orgs rightly were so afraid of the precedent that the 11th Circuit would set would impact every other immigration case around the country. Well, we're going to be able to appoint 11th Circuit judges. We're going to be able to appoint Northern District of Georgia judges, Southern District of Georgia judges, Middle District of Georgia. We're going to be able to make progress. And all of that is springboarded on the ACS network.
Thank you, David, and for bringing attention to these important topics. Colin, can you answer the question next?
Sure. Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me. And my name's Colin Parent. I am on the City Council in La Mesa, California, and also started out as with ACS as a chapter leader at NYU Law School. Help reinvigorate our chapter there, and then help co-found our lawyers chapter in San Diego after I returned. And with some people that I met from Columbia through the ACS while I was there. And so the ACS network has definitely been valuable for me in my career. One of the key things that was really helpful for me is that, after I was working in private practice, I worked in Governor Brown's campaign, but didn't get immediately appointed, and was able to talk to some people in ACS who were able to intercede on my behalf and communicate to some of the governor's political team to say, hey, we know this Colin guy. You should really, you should get him involved and find a role for him in the administration. And that was one of the you kind of have to hustle to get appointments in government, and ACS was definitely there for me, and that network and that existing relationship was really valuable and helped me get my real first role in government, and a lot of my both my elected role and some other work that I've done sort of all flowed from that political appointment that the ACS is really crucial to helping me secure. And then, I'm like David, I'm an elected official. I ran for office for the first time in 2016 in a city that had only Republican city council members. There's actually no Republican council members now. It's really shifted a lot. We're the Georgia of the San Diego area. And and it really, the ACS network, sort of separately, this is not like a key part of, this is not a specific 501c3, part of what ACS does, but it does create a network. And I have the phone numbers of email addresses of a bunch of people who care about similar things that I do, and relationships that maybe I found from ACS, but I can leverage for other things outside of ACS. And so when I'm running for office, I can go to those people and say, hey, we've worked on these issues together. You know that I care about this thing that you care about, that we've worked on these panels together. I'm running for office, will you help me? And people will say, yes, I know you through ACS, and so I'm going to help you sort of outside of that. And that kind of network was really valuable for me to be able to, for the first time, stand for public office, have the resources, financial resources. But then, I had a bunch of, downtown lawyers walking precincts for me in Little La Mesa, and it was because of that kind of network. And so I think that's been really valuable for me to be able to advance what I'm doing. And so for those of you who are on the call who are thinking, lots of lawyers are thinking about running for office, or law students thinking about running for office too, get involved with ACS. It's a get to know the people, to use it to develop your network, do the good work through ACS, but also understand that those relationships that you have outside of ACS or with ACS can be useful for your endeavors outside of ACS.
Thank you so much, Colin. And just so everyone knows, ACS is a 501c3 organization, but that doesn't mean that you cannot use our network to help you in other endeavors. Now, next up is Craig. Craig, can you answer the question and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Craig Mastantuono. I'm the Milwaukee, Wisconsin lawyer chapter chair and have been for 3 or 4 years. In thinking about your question, Saraswati, I think for a network to enhance my professional development, to affect my work, it has to really change the outcomes for what I do on behalf of clients. And my work with ACS has done that. I'm going to focus just on our chapter's efforts to get involved in judicial selection at the state level, circuit court judges in Wisconsin, and how ACS became integral to those efforts. I'm a principal at a small firm in Milwaukee that represents people accused of crime. I come from an indigent defense background, the public defender system here in Wisconsin. And for years, I've, on behalf of my clients, seen the effect of what Judge McKee spoke of earlier, that a bench that doesn't look like the community that it serves often misses the mark when trying to dispense justice, so to speak, for lack of a more eloquent term of putting that. I've wanted to do something about that for years. Just to give you some perspective, from 2011 to 2019, Governor Scott Walker was our state's governor. Some of you have heard of him. He had the chance to, or the opportunity to, appoint 93 positions to circuit and appellate courts here in Wisconsin. 91 of 93 of his appointments went to people who were white. That's not indifference to diversity on an ethnic and racial level here in Wisconsin. That is hostility to diversity. I had never seen anything so bad, even in years prior. So focusing with ACS and working with the affinity bar associations that you spoke of earlier, our state counterparts here in Wisconsin, in 2018, while Governor Walker was still governor, we co-sponsored with Wisconsin Hispanic Lawyers Association, Wisconsin African American Lawyers Association, Asian American Bar Association of Wisconsin, LGBTQX Bar Association of Wisconsin, events focused on bench diversity. And we used the Gavel Gap report that ACS had engaged and put out in years prior that showed that Wisconsin had a D on bench diversity, gender diversity in our court system, in our state court systems. At the same time, Wisconsin was being highlighted for having the worst racial disparity rates for incarceration for men of color, for African Americans particularly in Wisconsin. So dovetailing these two issues, we started to throw a series of events while Governor Walker was still governor, highlighting the lack of bench diversity. In the fall of 2018, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers was elected governor. Those of us who'd been highlighting these issues engaged to become involved in his judicial selection committee. Just for way of background, we elect judges in Wisconsin, but when a judge retires in the middle of his or her term, the governor appoints their successor and has many opportunities to do so during his or her term. I actually engaged several of my networks to try to be appointed and I'm a donor, and I used those networks. I have to tell you, ACS network was the network that got me on the committee. My counterpart in Madison, Jeff Mandel, was helpful introducing me to the designee to be the governor's legal counsel. And we were able to talk and have a deep conversation about what diversity on our bench should look like from a racial, ethnic, gender, and practice standpoint. And that conversation led to not only myself, but others from the affinity bar associations being appointed to the governor's committee. The governor's committee is 15 strong. 6 of us are identify as people of color, come from African American, Latino backgrounds. And my point to the governor's office was, you can't engage and do diversity just by setting out to do it. You have to have people from the communities that you're trying to access actually be in the decision-making room. They know their communities best. We know our communities best, and we can both engage high competence, progressivism, and diversity all at the same time. And that's the message that I took to the governor's office. I'm proud to say that the governor is about to appoint his 30th judge, and 13 are people of color. Well more than half are women. The governor's appointees include the first physically disabled judge on Wisconsin's bench. And to no surprise of any of us on the committee, these are highly, highly competent people who, once they felt they would have a fair chance at being considered for appointment to the bench, robustly engaged the application process. It wasn't surprising to myself, but I think that even to the legal community and the judicial community in Wisconsin, you still hear, gosh, are we trading competence for diversity? Some of the same, quite frankly, racist ways of thinking that can still dominate the conversation. So to me, my point is this. It's great. I love to sit in a room and talk to people who share my opinions and who share my passion for the issues that ACS embraces, be it mass incarceration, voting rights, bench diversity. But talk is cheap, quite frankly. And even changing the debate sometimes can have limited utility. To me, action is all what network needs to do. And if we don't engage our networks and pair with other like-minded associations to not only network with each other, but then put an action plan into place, then we're missing the mark. And ACS has been integral in that for me.
Thank you so much, Craig. I loved everything that you said. And I really love that, because I found the same thing. I've been able to use ACS to lift up other organizations and other people in organizations. And it's been the most powerful network. Now, we only have about 4 minutes left, but I don't want to cut off Margaret. So, you know, just answer the question. If we have time to get to the rest, we'll have time. If not, Margaret, I want your voice to be heard. So please introduce yourself. You can answer the question.
Thank you. My name is Margaret Russell, and I am a professor at Santa Clara Law School, where I teach primarily constitutional law and civil procedure. And I remember ACS from the beginning, so let me say happy birthday, ACS. I remember when you were born, and mine have you grown. So I'll get the parental part out of it. So I wanted to spend my time talking about the ways in which ACS has made a material difference in the lives of people in law school, not just law students, but law professors who care very much about nurturing law students to be very civically responsible, constitutionally literate people. So when ACS was born, I was already teaching, and in the decade or so before ACS, I had experienced the most prominent group growing in the law school in terms of being aware of the bench and the judiciary as the Federalist Society. And the Federalist Society, as you know, through the 80s and onward, has grown to have enormous influence on the courts. The great thing about starting the ACS chapter, I think, is that actually the Federalist Society and ACS do co-sponsor some things at our school, but ACS has really become the preeminent chapter for students who really want to see themselves as part of the Constitution, the living Constitution. The chapter model is brilliant, and I am so appreciative of that. It generates a lot of excitement, it builds leadership skills, and then it plugs law students into lawyers all around the country through the national conference and also through in my Bay Area Lawyer Council. And that's enormously important because, as you know, those of you who've gone to law school or in law school, the beginning of law school can be pretty dry and standard. You have a required curriculum and you are told that it's teaching you how to think like a lawyer. But part of thinking like a lawyer is being aware and strategic and purposeful. And that's not really taught in the law school curriculum first year. So it's been a lifesaver. Finally, I just want to say that in addition to connecting to local ACS lawyers and helping our students in this way, ACS is also, I think, responsible by suggesting that I be considered to be on the Judicial Nomination Committee of Senator Barbara Boxer. They did want a professor as well as, you know, lawyers and former judges. And I was so honored to serve for 2 years, and it contributed, our work contributed to some terrific judges, to the diversity of the bench in the Northern District. So thank you so much and happy birthday.
Thank you, Margaret. You know, I'm gonna use my moderator power and just do a quick 10-second lightning round. If you could all, starting with Margaret, just tell me an unplanned or surprising connection that you made through ACS. If it could be just a name and you could do it very quickly, that would be great. Let's end.
It happened very recently when Russ Feingold called me as the chapter advisor, and I learned that the judge for whom I clerked is Wisconsin friends with Russ Feingold.
Thank you. Craig, do you want to give a name?
Yeah, exoneree and attorney Jared Adams, who I met at the National Convention and brought to Milwaukee for a discussion on incarceration.
Colin, how about you?
I'm going to point out that one of my co-founders of our chapter, he met his wife at an ACS event that we organized, and so you can help your career and maybe other things too.
How romantic, David. You have your mute button on.
Thank you. Former Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court, Leah Sears, who will be heading judicial nominations for Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff. I like to say those words together when I can. Thank you.
Wonderful. And for me, Merrick Garland. Okay, with that, I'm going to kick it over to David. David, thank you for being patient.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. My name is David Adeleye. I am a current 3L at the Indiana University Maurer School of Law in Bloomington. Before I start, I want to give a shout out to two ACS members, longtime members who brought me into the ACS fold, Don Johnson and Zaid. Don Johnson, a professor who since transitioned to the Biden administration, encouraged me to get involved in ACS as a budding 1L and told me to come to the events. And Zaid told me to get involved with the ACS as soon as I hit campus. And since then, I haven't looked back. Since I started law school, I've been the 1L representative, our chapter president, and this past year I was fortunate enough to get appointed to be the National Student Board member, which has been a great opportunity. So, and then since then, I've been able to meet a whole bunch of great law students across the nation. The future of our democracy and the rule of law is in great hands. We are leaders, especially want to give a shout out to my board at Indiana University Maurer School of Law. We are identified as leaders in the law school and the community. Journalists reach out to us to provide our perspective on issues that are impacting the world. We appear in the news, we write letters to the editor and op-eds, and it's through the ACS network and resources that we're able to do this and amplify those opportunities. So I'm here today. I'm incredibly grateful to be moderating this panel. There's so many ACS friends who are making a difference in the world, and these three panelists are examples of how people are making a real difference about issues we deeply care about. So starting, going in this order, Loren, Austin, and Jessica, can you each give us a little bit about yourself, share a little bit about your work and how ACS has helped to inform or support your impact?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be on this panel. So I was at Georgetown and I was the president of ACS back in 2005, so quite a long time ago. And it really, I think, sort of launched my career because it gave me a really fantastic network. You know, I'm the only lawyer in my family. I'm a first-generation American. Like, I didn't know anything. And so I walked up to the ACS booth at the career fair and thought, like, or the club fair, or like the first day of law school, and thought, this seems really interesting. And then through the next 3 years of law school, it was a really wonderful place to learn about the law, learn about career paths in public service, to learn about clerking and everything else. And so I think a lot of where my career path has taken me can be tied back to contacts that I made or things that I learned or experiences that I had, you know, as a law student with ACS. I'm currently the Solicitor General of the District of Columbia, so I handle the district's appellate litigation primarily in the Supreme Court, the DC Circuit, and the DC Court of Appeals. We also have a large affirmative docket, and those are usually multi-state and amicus cases pertaining to civil rights issues. So we did a lot of voting rights work around the 2020 election, and then we've also participated in cases, you know, whether it's LGBTQ discrimination, sanctuary cities, other immigrant issues. And so I've been able, I think, through my job to carry out and live some of the values of ACS. And so you know, it's every day I feel like I'm in touch with someone who either was part of ACS, is on ACS. You know, Jill and I talk all of the time, and she's obviously a high up member of ACS. And so I just think that ACS, you know, pays dividends down the road. So for the law students that are, you know, on this now, it's something that's going to be a part of your professional life for years to come.
Hi, everybody. I'm Austin Evers. I'm the executive director of a watchdog organization called American Oversight. I also am a volunteer lawyer for something called the Voter Protection Program, which engages state leaders on election protection and anti-political violence work. I joined ACS, much like Loren did, basically by walking up to the booth at Boston College Law School back in 2006. Loved it. I went to law school because I liked the West Wing, and I think ACS was what taught me to really love the law and to believe in it as a vocation. I was the chapter president at BC. I was a next generation leader, I think the second year with Colin. I went to conventions. I went to an event on the 14th Amendment in Philadelphia in 2008, which remains one of the most educational experiences I've ever had. ACS was how I made contacts in the Boston legal market when I was a law clerk there. It's who I look to make friends in DC when I moved here. And I'd say what ACS really does is it gives you a sort of a community of inspiration and aspiration. It's when you go to a convention and you meet all these people who are doing incredible things, it helps you take stock. And so in 2016, in November 2016, when I was a lawyer at the State Department and I looked around and I felt like our democracy was under serious threat, I felt like I needed to do something and I could do something. And those were values and principles I think I really drew from my ACS experience. And when I launched this organization, we filed more than 230 lawsuits over the last 4 years. We amassed more than 1 million pages of records out of the Trump administration and really helped prove up how corrupt the administration was from top to bottom. And now we're turning our eyes to the states where we know there's an insurrectionist ideology brewing. We saw it come to town on the 6th. And again, I think it's that knowledge that you can use your legal degree and a network of people that you know to make a difference that I really owe to ACS.
Great. Hi, I'm Jessica Jackson, and I'm the Chief Advocacy Officer at the Reform Alliance. I first came to ACS, kind of funny route, because my mom, I was moving out to the Bay Area to go to Santa Clara School of Law. I saw Professor Russell was just speaking. She was one of my beloved professors and really helped us get the ACS chapter there off the ground. But my mom at the time had Credo Mobile, which was like some super progressive mobile service. And for some reason, I guess ACS had given them a notification that they were doing an event on the Supreme Court. It was kind of like a wrap-up, roundup event for the Bay Area Lawyers chapter. So she sent me, she sent it to me and told me I should go, and I did. And it was like Pam Carlin and Goodwin Liu and Jeff Fisher, and then some random guy from the Federalist Society who honestly I don't remember his name and never saw again. But it was obviously I was hooked, right? Like you don't go see Pam Carlin and Goodwin Liu and Jeff Fisher and not walk away hooked. So when I got to Santa Clara Law, I wanted to know if there was a chapter there, and there wasn't. There had been like a few years prior, but it had lapsed. So I worked with the national ACS and we were able to start a chapter there. I think we hosted like 65 events our first year, got everybody from like Erwin Chemerinsky to like Steve Berzon, just folks, James Brosnahan coming out talking about the work they were doing. And it was just such an incredible avenue, not just to meet professors and students, but really to be able to reach out to like literally anybody in the legal field and be like, hey, come speak at my school. And then of course you build a relationship with them. And so then I got really involved in the Bay Area Lawyers chapter as well, and ended up actually being a student member of the national board, which was really exciting in our Santa Clara Law School Chapter 1 chapter of the year, which was really exciting as well. So that's really how I came to ACS. I've never put it down ever since. So I still love the organization, use it as a network. I used it when I ran for City Council of Mill Valley. I had a bunch of friends coming out who were, ACS friends that came out and knocked on doors and helped me win my seat there. Which I served in for 6 years and served as mayor as well. I had friends in the ACS network who were donating to me, who I was friends with and posting stuff on Facebook and knew through ACS. And then honestly, I've used it a lot in my profession now. So I work on, policy, and I work on prison policy, prison conditions, as well as sentencing. And I was able to, work with David Dreyer, who just spoke on the last panel, who I knew from ACS from an Atlanta event I'd gone to when I was down in Atlanta interning during law school at the Southern Center for Human Rights. David and I worked on a bill that we passed in Georgia that brought dignity to incarcerated women across the state and banned the shackling of pregnant and incarcerated women in the state. I wouldn't have known him without ACS. I was able to get my first job coming out of law school in part through connections from ACS. So I feel like ACS has been a huge part of my career and a huge part of everything I plan to do in the future.
Thank you. Each of you have really high impact jobs, and to put it more simply, cool jobs. And each of you joined ACS as law students. I'm a current law student board member. And it's hard to see sometimes as a student where you're going to go as your career, but as we see in front of us today, these are excellent cast of people who are doing extraordinary things in the legal policy fields. Did your role as a student leader prepare you for what you're doing today and the work that you do every day?
If we're going in the same order, I'll start. And I think absolutely, because it allowed me to see what the law was like, and to, with guest speakers coming in, going to conventions, just get a sense of what progressive lawyers do out in the world. And so I think that really helped me kind of understand where I wanted to go. And so, my current job, I actually got to work with some folks, that are at ACS. I think Valerie Nannery's on here. She was a coworker of mine who now works at ACS. So, I just think the exposure and I guess just exposure that it gives you to the different paths that progressive lawyers can take, I think just allows you, whether you're a law student, whether you're, 5 years or 10 years out and thinking of making a change, to just see a path that you want to walk down.
I'll second that entirely. If I remember what it was like to be a law student, it felt like 90% of the time was just trying to get my arms around, the squibs in the case book and figure out what was going to be on the exam. And so kind of knowing what the law is was the big task. And ACS was all about what the law could be. I think it's hard to remember where we were in 2006, 7, 8, or even before that. The fight over gay marriage was raging, for example, and we've settled that now. The thought leadership around that issue was coming out of ACS, and I wouldn't have learned that. I wouldn't have dug into it as a lawyer or as a soon-to-be lawyer, but for that ACS work. And one of the things that's so exciting now is that if you engage in ACS as a law student today, you will see where the law might be in the future. And you can see that trajectory, and that's how you can link yourself to it. You can see where it could be going and participate in that part of the fight, not just study, what's going to be on the bar exam.
Yeah, I think I had a very non-traditional path to both college and law school. I actually came to law school and decided to become a lawyer after standing in the courtroom at 22 years old, holding my 2-month-old daughter and watching my husband get incarcerated for his drug addiction, essentially. So for me, that was the moment that really motivated me to go to college and to go into being a lawyer. I didn't have a ton of resources. I didn't have I didn't really have an idea of, exactly what I was embarking upon. And it was very intimidating. I think law school is intimidating to everybody, but I was very intimidated. I almost felt like I shouldn't really be there, right? Like, because of the experience and everything that I'd gone through. I think finding ACS and finding a group of progressive, lawyers that thought the way I did and really just were willing to look past, be progressive on so many issues. It felt like a safe space for me coming into law school. And I found, my group of friends, everybody I was making that chapter with at ACS ended up being my best friends in law school. Everybody I was friends with in law school joined ACS. It was really my safe space. And I think even as a lawyer, when things get hard, and it does, because we face a lot of folks out there who are lawyers who don't think like us, right? I'm working on bills in Georgia and Florida right now, and other states that, Mississippi, other states where there aren't a lot of lawyers that think progressively about the issues. And it's felt like, at least I have the ACS network. I can reach out to a David Dreyer, or I can reach out to somebody else I know through the network that's there that can be kind of that safe space and help me get into the work there on the ground floor.
Thank you. As you all spoke, I was reminded by a quote my tax professor said this past week. He said you should feel confident about being unconfident in the moment right now. It's great to see that each of you have stepped in confidently into your careers and are doing great things. So as we're looking forward, what do you see in the next 20 years for ACS, and particularly for those of us who are student leaders right now? And we'll go in the same order again.
So, I mean, I think for the student chapters, it's making sure they continue. I know that it's hard when you have people rotating out of law school every 3 years and you lose institutional memory and continuity. And so I think building, stable budgets and leadership pipelines, and also drawing on the alumni network that you have of folks that were ACS leaders is just going to, strengthen the student chapters. And I think for ACS as an organization overall, I think one of the things that they're doing now, and I think could be a real amazing force on going forward, is being the answer to the Federalist Society when it comes to who should be on courts, who should be in high-level political positions, and both training those people up, from their law school days on by letting them know, well, here are the steps you want to take if you're interested in a career in politics or a career at the bench or a career in government service. And so I think just that work is something that gets started at the national level, but I think there's some real room too for the student chapters to focus on, how do you, learn what ACS is now and have it, position yourself that it'll serve you for the rest of your career.
I think I'll just go back to my point that we're in such a different place in 2021 in terms of like the frontline legal issues than we were when I was a student, and that represents both progress and regression. So we're going to have different fights. I'm so excited as I meet law students to see how the values of equity and diversity are much more front of mind, and we're more fluent in it as a community than we used to be. There's a confidence there that's so important. We just came out of a 4-year period where the very guardrails of our democracy were at stake. And the fight for the next 10, 20 years has got to be about those guardrails. Voting rights has never been more at the forefront of the fight. We're talking about a new Voting Rights Act. If that gets passed, we have to litigate it for the next 50 years. Voter access. I mean, it has been the margins in important states, but also it's about the individual dignity of each one of those voters. That was, as we saw in Florida, over formerly incarcerated people, in Georgia, just the fight to register people. So the thing that has always struck me about ACS is that forward-looking, progress-minded approach to the law, looking where we can go. And the students, your peers, David, you're going to be the ones who push this generation of leaders to go farther, who have ideas that haven't really bubbled up to the surface yet. And 10 years from now, 20 years from now, people are going to be talking about the papers that are being written right now, and the conventions that are happening right now about those being foundational to the fight. And just bottom line though, you can look back on the last 20 years and victory and progress is not guaranteed. So much isn't better. And so that is what I think we really also need to have from the student leaders is that just to stay galvanized, to fight, to not take anything for granted, and to keep pushing. And ACS is going to be, I think, kind of the infrastructure for some of that.
Yeah, I think the big opportunity here is to really infiltrate for over the next 20 years is to really infiltrate the public consciousness on the issue of judges. Trump was able to get through 200 judges and just slam through, like a fourth of our federal judiciary at this point is a Trump appointee, right? And that was just one term. What if he had gotten that second term? We weren't that far away from it. And all of that really came without political capital being spent. If you think about it, all those district court judges, all those appellate court judges, like I saw very, very few articles on them. And the ones I did see were like nerdy, political or lawyer legal outlets that the public is not actually going to be reading. Yet those judges are going to have a profound impact on the course of our nation, right? They're going to be the ones who are interpreting whatever Biden does. They're going to be the ones who are interpreting, bills that I care about and work to pass, like the First Step Act. They're going to be the ones deciding whether a person goes to prison or not, right? So I think there's a real opportunity. You do see people get riled up when it's a Kavanaugh, when it's a Amy Coney Barrett, when it's, although maybe not even enough on Amy Coney Barrett, it felt like he should have had to spend a lot more capital to have that process be as crazy as it was, and rushed as crazy as it was. So I think that the real opportunity here for ACS and for the student chapters, because they're the ones who, are on social media and using their phones and knowing how to get messages out, and 10 times better a communicator than me. I got to go on Reddit every time some new, TikTok or whatever is introduced and be like, hey, what is this? How does it work? Old person here. Student chapters should really get a hold of the communications issue around judges and how we make sure that the public isn't letting somebody like Trump or whatever Republican president comes in the future basically move the Federalist Society into the White House unnoticed and slam our courts full of judges who are going to undo all the progress we're able to make.
Thank you for that. I want to thank all three of you for joining the panel. And it looks like the student leaders across the nation have our marching orders now. So I'd like to turn things over to Russ Feingold, the president of the American Constitution Society, to wrap us up today. And I want to thank you again for joining us.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, David. It has been a tremendous pleasure to get to know you during the past year, a tremendously collaborative person. So thank you, and thank everybody. I am Russ Feingold, the president of the American Constitution Society. And as I listen, I realize how fortunate I am to be the president in this 20th year. I want to thank all of today's speakers for showcasing just some of the impact ACS has had during those 20 years. It's really remarkable what grew from Justice Rubin's idea in 2001. And Peter, I want to say that of all the people, when I was given this job, you were the first one to email me. And Peter has spent hours briefing me on the history and purposes of ACS. So his interest has never flagged. And I thank him and honor him for what he's helped create here. So I am honored to lead ACS at this critical time. While each of today's speakers had compelling stories and experiences to share, we know that they're not alone. We know so many of you in the ACS community have your own stories to share. Maybe you started your law school chapter, or maybe you met your first supervisor at an ACS convention. So we're going to ask you to share those stories with us. Please email us with your stories from the past 20 years at campus@acslaw.org. We're hoping to highlight members throughout the year. Send us old pictures if you have them too. I also want to challenge current student chapter and lawyer chapter leaders to research your chapter's first presidents. We can actually help you with that research. So reach out to your chapter liaison or email us at campus@acslaw.org. And speaking of having old pictures or old stuff, I ran into the other day by accident in my house in one of those boxes of things you find. For some reason, I had kept an old speech of one of my heroes, Senator Edward M. Kennedy, Ted Kennedy. And sure enough, it was a speech that Teddy gave at the Georgetown University Law Center to ACS on September 25, 2002. He said to ACS then, "I know I'm with friends when I'm with the American Constitution Society. I've worked with many of you on important constitutional, civil rights, and civil liberties issues in recent years. You value what your name reflects, fulfillment of the values embedded in our Constitution, especially those of liberty, justice, and opportunity for all." And then he gave his speech. And at the end, he concluded with the critical issue of the federal judiciary. Many of you are lawyers or law students, he said, and you know that on judicial nominations, the stakes are very high. Like Congress and the president, judges have the power to shape and define our democracy and determine issues of vast importance for all Americans. Confirming judges to lifetime seats where they will make decisions of profound importance for the Constitution and the country is one of our most important responsibilities in the Senate, and I intend to do all I can to exercise it effectively. And of course he did. But here we are 20 years later, living up to that charge. Because of the great working groups that our chapters, lawyer chapters across the country have stood up, we were there in the critical moment during this past year. We were there recommending 400 judges 2 hours after President-elect Biden was announced. And we are going to continue to be there as this process continues. That has been our highest priority during the past year. But now, as we go to our 20th year, and as we reflect on ACS's history, our main theme of our 20th year is going to be the need to finally reckon with our country's deep historical roots and the modern manifestation in racism, including that which is embedded in our founding document, the Constitution. We do so because we know that in order to get a more just future, we actually have to reckon with our past. So please join us in this important work and share your ideas for the organization, including your chapters. We're actually exploring a number of options, including lessons we can learn from international efforts and our own historical attempts to redress wrongs done to entire racial communities. I don't want to conclude this wonderful program on a downbeat note, but I do want to be straight. What the challenge remains in place by quoting an interview I heard the other day that was given a long time ago, but played the other day on NPR with James Baldwin. James Baldwin said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." James Baldwin said, "That's not meant for me." He said, "You know, for Black Americans, the Statue of Liberty is a bitter joke, meaning nothing to us. A reminder that this statue, open to the sea, welcoming immigrants, which is itself under siege from the very beginning, had its back to America." Now, those are sad words, but if this organization really means anything, it has to be an organization that is leading the charge and looking forward to the fact that there has never been a real reckoning with the racist elements and origins of our Constitution, the bitter history that has followed. So join us in this effort. We'll begin in earnest on March 2nd, when we'd ask you to join us for the first in a series of national programs under our theme of reckoning with the Constitution. Details will be available on the ACS website, and stay tuned for information about additional programming at both the national and local levels. Thanks to all of you who participated and joined us today in this exciting kickoff to our 20th anniversary. Thanks so much and have a great day.